As Election Day approaches, the Stop the Steal movement has resurfaced, with activists from former President Donald Trump's 2020 efforts preparing a detailed plan to contest any potential loss in 2024. These activists have been priming Trump supporters for months, arguing that the only way he could lose again would be due to fraud. Their strategy includes filing legal challenges, urging state lawmakers to block election certification, and organizing nationwide protests, culminating on January 6, 2025, when Congress is set to certify the electoral votes. Ivan Raiklin, a former Green Beret and political operative with close ties to Trump's associates, recently shared his strategy with a group in Pennsylvania, referring to January 6th as a pivotal date in his plans. Trump's allies and supporters are increasingly promoting baseless claims of voter fraud through a network of widely followed podcasts, sermons in conservative megachurches, and rallies in key states. Many Trump aligned pastors have gone so far as to frame the election as a battle between good and evil, casting Harris as the Antichrist and claiming that Trump has been divinely chosen to lead. Unlike in 2020, when Trump's challenges were largely reactive and fragmented, the MAGA movement has begun to coordinate its strategies months in advance. Some activists are pushing the controversial idea that state legislatures should disregard the popular vote altogether and allocate their state's electoral votes to Trump by default. Although a 2022 federal law made it more challenging to overturn certified election results, experts warn that those pushing these conspiracy-driven agendas appear more organized, focused, and in some cases, more extreme than they were 4 years ago. Federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and the FBI, have raised concerns that the rhetoric around election fraud could trigger violence similar to what occurred during the 2020 election cycle. A bulletin issued earlier this month warned that extremist rhetoric about the election could motivate people to engage in violence. Mark Harris, a former investigator for the House Select Committee on the January 6th insurrection, noted that tactics to undermine the election have evolved since 2020, despite the safeguards now in place. Those looking to overturn the election are way ahead of where they were in 2020, he said. But pro-democracy defenders are also more prepared. How that plays out remains unclear. MAGA movement influencers have increasingly spread baseless claims of electoral fraud. Right-wing broadcasters like Emerald Robinson have framed delays in vote counting as evidence of cheating, arguing it doesn't take days to get election results, it takes days to cheat. Patrick Byrne, former CEO of Overstock.com, warned of a cyber attack that would rig the election, and even speculated on Telegram that such interference could lead to extreme societal breakdowns. Greg Locke, a prominent pastor from Tennessee who had spoken near the Capitol the day before the January 6 riots, warned his congregation of a man-made catastrophic storm supposedly orchestrated to steal the vote from Trump. In many of these conspiracy-laden theories, familiar ideas from 2020 are resurfacing, including the notion that voting machines are manipulated to benefit Democratic candidates, or that election officials in swing states are complicit in widespread voter fraud. Joe Hoft, a contributor to the conspiracy theory-driven website The Gateway Pundit, asserted, "The same systems are being used. Many of the same players are in place." On Steve Bannon's War Room podcast, a popular outlet for election conspiracy theories, guests have frequently warned that Democratic officials could block certification of a legitimate Trump victory. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, who has actively voiced skepticism about election integrity, has raised concerns about Capitol Police training exercises, suggesting that these could be part of a Democratic plan to keep Trump out of office. Trump himself has echoed some of these conspiracy theories, alleging that the 2024 election is fraught with fraud. However, Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, and the Republican National Committee have issued statements encouraging trust in the electoral process. "You can trust American elections," Lara Trump said, emphasizing the party's efforts to ensure election security. The Trump campaign has also ramped up its voter mobilization efforts, encouraging a high turnout to make the election results too big to rig. Trump spokesperson Caroline Leavitt told CNN that the campaign is working hard to protect the vote and ensure Americans can have confidence in the process. On another front, various pro Trump groups are actively gathering alleged evidence of election fraud, preparing to file lawsuits to contest a potential Harris victory. Simultaneously, other far right figures are advocating for state legislatures to step in and award their state's electors to Trump directly, bypassing the popular vote. This approach generated headlines recently after Representative Andy Harris of North Carolina voiced support for such a strategy, suggesting that damage from Hurricane Helene could disenfranchise voters and warrant legislative intervention. Although Harris later retracted his comments, the proposal has gained traction among Trump aligned figures, such as Raiklin, who has spent weeks advocating for this plan to GOP legislators. Constitutional scholars have pointed out that these plans are legally dubious. Karen Brinson Bell, executive director of North Carolina's election board, called the proposal a violation of law. Law professor Derek Muller from the University of Notre Dame explained that state legislatures would need to repeal existing election laws before assigning electors independently. It's too late for legislatures to act, Muller noted, explaining that changing the rules amid an active election could lead to due process violations. Instances of politically motivated violence have already emerged this year, including 2 alleged assassination attempts on Trump, shootings at Democratic National Committee (DNC) offices, and suspicious packages sent to election offices. Amidst this rising tension, some pro-Trump activists are predicting further unrest. Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, warned that if vote counting drags on, anger from 2020 could resurface, potentially leading to violence at vote counting centers. Posts on online forums frequented by extremists like 8kun, formerly 8chan, and The Donald have been urging followers to prepare for potential conflict, with calls for violent action to defend the election outcome. Violent rhetoric on platforms like Telegram has surged over the past month, as reported by the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, a nonprofit monitoring such content. Devin Burghardt, head of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, noted that many extremist groups are now discussing plans in private online spaces, making it harder to monitor potential threats for post-election unrest. At the Reawaken America Tour rally, Pastor Mark Burns from South Carolina urged supporters to do whatever it takes to keep Harris out of power, framing the election as a fight of good versus evil. Although he later clarified that he condemned physical violence, his comments reflect the apocalyptic tone adopted by some far-right leaders, portraying the election as a spiritual war that requires a drastic response. As the 2024 election draws closer, both Trump's supporters and pro-democracy groups are gearing up for what could be a deeply contentious outcome. The polarization and heightened rhetoric signal that Election Day might just be the beginning of a prolonged and potentially turbulent period for the nation.